name's Peter LaVaute. I live in central Missouri, beautiful central Missouri. It's a wonderful day. And I just want to give a little introduction to my piece here. And over the years, I have made what people are now calling artwork, but it was just sort of statements that came out of my finding materials that sort of talk to me, which is a typical thing that artists say. But on top of that, the art dovetails into what I did for a living for a while and what I did as an avocation. So I had a small manufacturing company, only 5 direct employees, but we did just-in-time manufacturing, so that it was closer to 100 employees or 100 jobs that were touched by what we did. When I sold out of that business, I was interested in concentrating on trying to figure out how we could go from an unsustainable set of circumstances in regards to our economy, our society, justice, and whatever, to one that is sustainable, that would take care of people. So because of that, the themes of my pieces have a lot to do with being against war, being against drama, and what I mean by drama is not formal drama, it's drama queen kind of drama. In other words, blowing things out of proportion to the value of what's underlying. So the name of this exhibit, this virtual exhibit, is Do-Over. And why is it Do-Over? Well, from my analysis, and I studied agricultural economics, and I've been a student of sustainability really for years and years. In my analysis, most of the systems that we have developed through the Industrial Revolution and beyond have been based on small numbers of people figuring out how to gain control of resources and become very rich and make sure that they get the bulk of the benefits of those resources. There's a lot of things that have changed with the advent of the internet and cyberspace. One thing, people don't read as much. They just read little clips of things like Twitter. So looking at sustainability, whether it be in the agricultural sector, healthcare, justice, we need to reevaluate all these systems, not based on maintaining this unequal benefit system, but to systems which take care of all of us, not even just in the United States, but all over the world. So I'm going to close out and have my good friend Sean Galloway sum this up.
I can see the soiled sheets, mired in fear's belief. Religion in bed with politics created worlds of war and grief. Now this masquerading of the master has gone on for way too long. So I'm asking you, America, who would Jesus bomb? Wake up, America, love yourself. It's time to see the light come back to the Commonwealth. Wake up, America, while we still have our dream. Let's walk with the Master. Wake up, America, let your heart be seen. I can feel the hollow bellies of children with nothing to eat, while the fat cats on Wall Street find another way to cheat. Now have we become slaves and abandoned our own hearts? Now I'm asking you, America, who would Martin Luther King starve?
Okay, this is where it all started. I was out cutting firewood on my farm, and I looked down and I saw this piece of wood laying there, and I just went, my God, that's beautiful. I can't cut that up and burn it in my stove. And so I threw it in the back of my pickup truck and hauled it in with the rest of the firewood and threw it in the corner in my shop. I have a blacksmith and woodworking shop. And then about a few months later, in the middle of the winter, when I didn't have a whole lot to do, I went, what am I going to do with that? So I ended up taking a disc, an old worn out disc, agricultural disc that they used to cultivate the ground, and a chisel plow point, and an old scythe to make a stand for it because I wanted to display it. And so I ended up with Genesis 1 because it's the first piece that I really did that came out of looking at what's in my environment and it telling me what it wants to do. I know that's a really trite thing that all these artists say is, oh, the material told me what to do. Or the old stone cutters, they said, oh, the statue is, I have to liberate it from the stone. But that's really not what it is I wouldn't have thought to do this if I just wasn't inspired by the piece that I found. And that's the way it is with most of my pieces. But I just ended up realizing that utilizing a tree trunk that bifurcates and turning it over, turns it into a torso that became the foundation for many of my pieces, not all of them. And that sort of started me on the road of making, people are calling it folk art, but I look at it like I just enjoyed making pieces that talked to me, that talked, and hopefully in essence will talk to everyone.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog, you're crying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. Well, you ain't never caught a rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine. Well, they said you was high class.
Okay, this piece is called All Shook Up, and it was when I found this piece out in the wood, the wooden part of this, I looked at it and I went, wow, it just looks like Elvis doing his gyrations. Now for the younger generation, they're probably not as familiar with Elvis, but he was always moving his body in a way that the older people thought was just scandalous. And so I just decided that I would take Elvis's lead and turn it into a fuzzy tree because of the lyrics of All Shook Up start out with itching like a man on a fuzzy tree. And so the man, I've named him Ichabod because of the headless horseman. And this is Ichabod's head. And Ichabod is just itching like crazy, so his eyes are popping out and his teeth are gritting. And it's sort of like if you ever sat in a big chigger nest Ichabod is itching like a man on a fuzzy tree. The fuzz is raw wool from my neighbor's sheep, and a lot of it probably was growing right on the farm here. And so he was nice enough to let me get some of that and make my fuzzy tree. Okay, this piece's title is The Scales of Injustice. Of course, you've got the scales of justice, which are supposed to be equal, and turns out that these days people are talking a lot. Actually, it was a few years earlier that the idea of 99 and 1, in other words, 1% owned so much more than the lower part of the population, that and everybody kept talking about it, but I decided that I wanted to try to demonstrate 99 and 1. So we have one fat cat who is got more powerful and weighs more than all 99 of the rest of Americans. And so I represented that with these penny heads. That's what I called them. And the top one is they're standing on a old worn out agricultural disc. That's a component that I use a lot. And on the bottom side is a beat up trash can lid. So we have the rural folks up here and the urban folks down there. But all of them together do not have the power or the financial weight of one fat cat. And really it turns out that it's like 1/10 of 1% of the rich people are the ones with the big bucks. And actually now during COVID, Musk and the guy who owns Amazon are just getting wealth beyond. I mean, the Amazon fella just in the last couple of months made $256 billion, while we've got 30, 40, 50 million Americans out of work. And so it's just a good example. And the fact that this doesn't change, it's welded together. The scales generally are set up so that they go back and forth depending on the circumstances. This circumstance is not going to change until the weld's broken and the mass of the people realize that they're the ones who really have the power. And if they all get together and coalesce and look out for each other, look out for the environment, then they will be able to change this situation. And the people who are now running things and the corporations will need to sort of reevaluate the basic foundations of what's going on and how wealth and resources are distributed within our society. So this is the scales of injustice, 99 and 1. Okay, this is a piece that once again came from my wood cutting, and I looked down and I went, I don't think I can burn that one up. And so it reminded me of a torso of a female that had sort of a rough life. And being a blacksmith and a horseshoer or a farrier, and I raised horses, had 26 mares at one time. I was fairly well steeped in equine concepts and thought. I went, there's an old saying, rode hard and put up wet. That woman is just rode hard and put up wet. And so, obviously with that, it's an equine kind of concept. When somebody rides a horse really hard and they get all lathered up and covered with sweat, what you're supposed to do is cool them out, they say. So you're supposed to walk them until they're not so hot, because if you don't, there's a chance that they could founder or have a severe hoof problem because of the buildup of lactic acid in their hooves. So you're always supposed to cool down a horse so that you don't ruin it. But this reminds me of the honky-tonk women who drink hard, smoke hard, and are rode hard and put up wet. And they end up having a bit of wear and tear on themselves, you might say.
Be careful of what you say. Be careful in every way.
Okay, we've got Big Brother here, so I'm calling him Big Bro. This is all about the surveillance state that has developed over the last 20 or 30 years. There's CCTV cameras in urban areas that cover much of it so that they can always pull up what's happened. There is, we found out from the revelations of Edward Snowden that the NSA pretty much has been wiretapping just about everything and being aware of just about everything we do. And then it turns out that we're giving away all our information to Google and to all these places. So there's really almost no privacy anymore. This was all, once again, with a piece of wood from the forest, from the woods, upside down. The feet are old gate hinges. Of course, this is just, once again, metal from my metal bin. Anyway, it's just sort of talking about how there's not as much privacy as there used to be. You really have to be careful, because one way or another, I mean, Kellyanne Conway said even that her microwave was spying on her. So maybe she's right, but my microwave probably isn't that new. But anyway, Big Brother's watching you.
Big Brother is watching you. Big Brother is watching you.
This is one of my favorite pieces, and really the only one I think that I've ever shown at a gallery. And at that show, it won the award for the best piece using repurposed materials. That's what they call recycled these days. And anyway, this is 4 Right Feet, the first slow dance. So what happened was, the history behind it is, years ago, and I have no idea how many years, in a junk store or antique shop, and I think it was along the Mississippi River, I picked up 4 shoe lasts. And a shoe last is a form that they used to use to make shoes. They would put the leather over it so that it was the right shape and the right size for a size 9 or whatever it is. So one day, once again in the wintertime, I had a nice warm shop, and I saw those sitting on the shelf. Well, I pulled them out, and upon closer inspection, I found out that they were all right feet. And I went, my God, what am I going to do with 4 right feet? You know, I mean, and then I thought about the saying, you dance like you've got 2 left feet. And I thought, boy, 2 left feet. Well, 4 right feet's got to be at least twice as bad as 2 left feet. So what I did was I got to thinking back and thinking about the first time that I had a slow dance with a girl, and how absolutely terrified I was, and how nervous, and we had no idea what we were doing. But so this is called 4 Right Feet, the first slow dance. sort of commemorating that kind of experience. And it really resonates with a lot of people because almost everybody had that experience if they were lucky enough to have a slow dance with somebody of the opposite sex when they were young. Hi, this is a piece that's called "Who Would Jesus Bomb?" And the genesis, which is probably the good word to use in this situation, the inspiration for this was Christians. There are many Christians who are our warriors. Well, in general, that's a good thing. The fact that there's the tenet, thou shalt not kill, I'm not sure that it meant thou shalt not kill unless your superior officer tells you to, or if the president tells you to, or whatever. So I think that it's especially poignant at the moment because we have a vice president who makes a big point of being a Christian. And recently he was a large part of the decision-making process and pushing for the murder of General Suleiman. And General Suleiman was one of the top officials of the Iranian government. Well, I mean, you'll say, and he was a bad guy, there's no doubt about it. But unfortunately, the people who know that area said that it was a really bad idea to do that. But I guess Pence just pushed hard to get it done. And then as retaliation, the Iranian government had a rocket attack on one of our bases. And we had a lot of our troops get traumatic brain injury. So anyway, just the idea, there have also been reports of in the academies like West Point, Annapolis, that you go further if you are a very fervent Christian. So I think that I think that Jesus would have a hard time deciding. And actually Jesus, he used to have a halo, but I took his halo away. And until he decides whether he should even bomb anybody, which I think Jesus would probably not bomb anybody, he doesn't get his halo back. So anyway, this is Who Would Jesus Bomb? Let's think about the gravity of war and killing other people. Okay, well the name of this piece is Kundalini Energy. And once again, I just took a piece from when I was cutting firewood, and it spoke to me, and I'm calling it Kundalini Energy, which is sort of the feminine, there's a special feminine energy, and I'm sure there's people who know far more about this than I do. But I had an artist friend paint the base or core chakra on it, and the whole idea is just sexual energy emanating from this area of people's bodies, and these red emanations are steel, which I forged in my blacksmith shop. And it's, once again, I'm no expert in the arcane knowledge of Kundalini energy, but it just seemed like a great name, and what research I did, it seemed very appropriate to call it that. And so it's one of my favorite pieces. And you know, people call what I do crotch art. Well, I call it inverted, bifurcated tree trunk art. So, but it's a little more PC than crotch art. And I actually, up in a art museum in St. Joseph, I was talking to one of the patrons and told her about my crotch art, and she was really offended. But the executive director of the museum, who said, "You're one of the few people that I know who actually admitted that they made something like crotch art." And he said, "I think it's really cool." So anyway, this is Kundalini energy, and one of my favorite pieces. And I hope I don't offend anybody by that. But they shouldn't be. There's nothing wrong with good sexual energy. Okay, this piece, I call it the anti-drama, anti-war radiator. So it's sort of based on the idea like a Tibetan prayer wheel, that person comes and uses his own energy to move it around, and it radiates out anti-war and anti-drama vibes to the whole universe. So people can come and do this. And really, it's an important thing. It's sort of like up in Fairfield, Iowa, the Maharishi meditators. They have a big dome where every day hundreds of people go into that dome to meditate. And their belief is that raises the vibrational level of the whole world enough so that it affects world peace, and we don't have as much war. Now, of course, empirically, that's very difficult to guarantee, but we could sure try to believe it. But the point is initially I was planning on putting this on top of a 30-foot utility pole. But because of COVID, I don't have enough help, and I had to sort of scale down and not have the wind be the motivating factor, but have humans. So somebody can come in, and if they're from the northern hemisphere, make it go in a clockwise direction. And if they're from the southern hemisphere, they can do it counterclockwise and help keep war and drama to a minimum in the world. It's an amazing thing. Okay, well, this is Don't Look Back. And what it is you might be able to recognize President Obama. And it was inspired by an interview that he had shortly after his inauguration, the first term, with George Stephanopoulos. George Stephanopoulos asked him, what are you going to do about the torture and the war crimes and things of George W. Bush and Dick Cheney? They didn't seem to deny that that those things happened. And so Obama just basically said, well, you know, unless it's really blatant, which I consider that it was probably pretty blatant, you know, I'm going to look forward and I'm not going to look backwards. Well, I sort of look at it like every one of the federal employees that takes an oath of office, they take an oath to uphold the Constitution, to the laws of the United States, treaties, and whatever. And so just because they don't want to look backwards, that's usually where crimes and things that shouldn't have happened. So it seems like people at the higher echelons of government and commerce and whatever seem to have a totally different pass when it comes to illegal and immoral things. And, you know, the idea that they made it so that it was okay to torture, they called it enhanced interrogation, or it was okay to invade Iraq illegally. And it turns out that Johns Hopkins University Health School did a study and figured that approximately 1.2 million people in Iraq were killed. So we were responsible not only for that many people being killed in Iraq, but we lost a lot of our own folks, and a lot of them got their legs blown off and PTSD and all that kind of thing. So I really think, and I'm not just picking on Obama, because I voted for him twice, and I think he was probably one of the best presidents in modern history. But I have a friend who was extremely upset with me because of the blinders. And the whole idea is don't look back. And that with these blinders, it's an equine thing. You put it on mules so they don't get distracted by things on the side so that they don't spook. Well, she thought that it, especially considering he's African American or half African American, that it was really a bad thing. Well, I never thought about it in those racial terms, and with things going on now, I can sort of understand. She insisted that we not have it on him, but that's really a core part of the piece, to bring out, you know, the fact that we need to look back. We need to make people accountable, and especially in this day and age when we have what I consider to be a really one of the most, well, there's absolutely no doubt, the most corrupt administration and president in the history of the United States. So this is, don't look back, and I think Barack Obama was one of our best presidents, and I wasn't looking at it as a racial thing. But people will have to judge that for themselves. And I used my father was an international businessman, and I cut up his belt. He's passed away. It's a Dior belt. I just thought that was appropriate. I don't know whether President Obama likes that kind of stuff or not, but that's what I had available. I do my best to use what I have without going beyond my area. And so a lot of the things, now I did get, I was at the Boone County Mule and Draft Horse show and auction, and I was given these blinders by a fellow who sells harness and whatever. And I told him what it was going to be, and I ended up sending him pictures and everything, and he was really excited. But anyway, this is Don't Look Back, and one of my favorite pieces. Okay, this piece right here, I call Lester's World. Lester was my father, who was the international sales manager for a large industrial boiler system company. that competed with like General Electric and Westinghouse. He would take trips literally all around the world for 6 or 8 weeks and go to mostly third world countries. I remember he built a number of the power plants and sugar refineries on Cuba and Puerto Rico. And when I say built, he sold the dictators on building these things, and his really target market was always dictators. He was friends with Batista in Cuba prior to Castro. He was also tight with Franco of Spain and the Shah of Iran and guys like that, because once he got them liking the idea of building a power plant or some sort of industrial facility, then they would just be able to say, sure, Lester. And there was no EPA investigation, no nothing. They just said, do it. And they did it. And so every time he went on one of these 6 to 8 week junkets around the world, he would come back with at least one antique weapon from places he had been. And he said that he was collecting all these weapons, and this is just a fraction of the weapons, for me. Well, it didn't really turn out that way. They ended up on his bedroom wall, mainly. But when he passed away, all of a sudden I had all these weapons to try to figure out something to do with. And so I decided to make, especially since I found that incredible, almost 15-foot piece of wood, rough sawn oak, I think it is. Maybe it's probably walnut. But anyway, this piece is cherry. So I decided to put the antique crossbow to signify the Christians, and the serpent, which is sort of a signification of the devil, that went up, and the Christians trying to impose their sovereignty over the Hindus and the Muslims and Sikhs or whatever in the world, and and the weapons just signified that they didn't really go along with it all the time. So this is Lester's world. He also, some of my relatives say that there was suspicion that he was actually CIA or something like that, but I think it's more aptly termed he was part of what they called, I'm blanking on it. Anyway, people who went around the world and got third world countries to make big projects and borrow money for them, and then they had to do what the United States wanted them to do. Economic hitman, I think is the name of it. So this is Lester's world, and very much into weapons. I had to think of something to do with them so they were out of reach of everybody. And this is what evolved from that. Okay, this is a piece, I'm not sure that it actually has a name, I just call it the Twin Towers. And my wife, right after the 9/11 incident, was commissioned by a bank in Jefferson City to build something to commemorate the experience. And so I collaborated with her by building in my blacksmith shop the armatures, or the skeleton, you might say, out of steel angle iron. They were perfectly symmetrical when I built them, but she is a expert, probably the foremost expert in the world on handmade paper. And so she covered these steel structures with handmade paper, which you put on wet. And as it dried, it twisted and torqued the pieces, which made for this really interesting variations, and so it ended up like this, which I think is really wonderful. And it turns out that I'm especially drawn to these because I was in the middle of building my house when 9/11 happened, living in a small camper trailer, and was so busy that the impact and everything really just didn't hit me. And so I just sort of went on with my life and didn't think too much about it until about 5 or 6 years ago, when I found out that a third skyscraper went down on 9/11 in the afternoon, and it was not hit by an airplane, which is what the government wants you to think was the real cause of the collapse of the Twin Towers. It was not hit by an airplane, and according to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, it came down because of office fires. Well, being a blacksmith, I just went, wait a minute. It takes about 1,800 degrees to melt steel, and regular fires don't get much more than 750 degrees. So there was no logic, and it came down in its own footprint at free fall. In other words, within like 6 seconds, a 45-story, 500-foot tall building came down in its own footprint. Well, I started looking into it and found out about an organization called Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, and I looked at their information, and there's 2,000 or 3,000 engineers, architects, metallurgy specialists and everything that say that there's no way that office fires could have done that. So the more I looked into it, I got involved. Right now, I then got involved in the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry. I'm going to put their websites up, and if you dare to look while you're sitting at home, if you dare to look at those websites, look at what it says, because it is absolutely proven that those 2 airplanes that hit the towers did not do all the damage, that it did not make them come down. You know, if you're willing and take the courage to look at it, don't take my word for it, then just this whole process that I'm doing here would be worth it, because we need to get the truth out. 9/11 started a war against Muslims. It started the Iraq War, even though there was no connection to it. The whole Middle East has been semi-destroyed as a result, plus all the people who have died over there, and all our precious men and women who have died or been damaged by being sent there on a fool's mission. Okay, this is a fun piece that I built a number of years ago. My friend, who is unfortunately now deceased, he was having his 60th birthday, and the birthday party was starting in the afternoon. He insisted that nobody give him presents, but I just decided that I had to do something, so I went ahead and looked in my blacksmith shop in the metal pile. Every blacksmith has got a metal pile, and I had a couple of old gate hinges and a few horseshoes, and I don't even know what this was, but then I had one big horseshoe that I could put up here, And this is an agricultural disc. So I just took junk, people would say, out of my junk pile, or actually it's not junk pile, it's all useful stuff. Obviously I used it for this. And I put together what I call Bobby's Wild Woman. And so I built it and took it down to where the party was and presented him with it and saying, Bobby, this is the last wild woman your wife will ever let you have. And the reason I say that is because she was always complaining about the earlier women in his life. So he really liked it and ended up putting it in his garden. And after he passed away, I inquired what happened to the wild woman. Of course, the wild woman was not very popular with his wife, since it was inspired by the jealousy of my friend. And so anyway, she said, oh, it's probably in the ivy. Why don't you. Well, she didn't own the house anymore, and I had to ask her for an owner, and he said, I don't care. So I ended up digging it out of the ivy, and it had not been painted originally. And the wooden torso was all rotten. So I had to put a new torso on, and I mounted it on a new stand and painted it and added jewelry. And she's got some really pretty earrings. And anyway, so this is Bobby's Last Wild Woman Resurrected. And I ended up giving it, trying to give it to his daughter. And technically, I guess she owns it, but they live a long ways away and never picked it up. So I guess the wild woman is still with me, and she's for a long time on my Airbnb. She was on the porch greeting the guests when they came in. So this is Bobby's Last Wild Woman Resurrected. Well, this is the last piece in this virtual exhibit of my folk art. You'll find that I'm a bit social and politically oriented. We're having a problem at the moment in the country, and it has to do with Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, who was the top KGB, which is the secret police that had control over the Soviet Union, and then after the fall of the Soviet Union, over Russia. So he was sort of like one of the big goons of the Soviet Union. His specialty was developing assets. So what an asset is in spyware is you get somebody who has influence or knowledge, or who would be a benefit to you to have them under your control. What you do is you compromise them in some way, perhaps sexually, like having them pee on prostitutes in a bed in a Moscow hotel room, or compromise them financially. That's a possibility too. There's all kinds of, they also send, there was one that he did recently, sent a woman to the National Rifle Association, and she infiltrated it and became a lover with one of the top dogs there, and I call them dogs. So anyway, I in this viewing of Vladimir Putin and Russia, I think unfortunately our young people, and don't really have a historical perspective about what kind of adversarial relationship we have with Russia. When I was in grade school, I think it was, anyway, we were in what they called the Cold War. And the Cold War was very close, came very close to becoming a hot war. And at that time, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, which we almost had a nuclear holocaust over. Very close. There was all kinds of problems that the spies were going back and forth. And so Russia was not just Russia, it was the Soviet Union, there was Poland, there was East Germany, there was Hungary, all the Balkan states. They were under the thrall of the Soviet central government. So this was a big deal. And then and I think it was Reagan, I don't remember history perfectly, helped take the Iron Curtain down, they said. So the Iron Curtain really was the control of the Russians over this large empire, sort of, that they had. So people like Vladimir Putin are really pissed off about that, and they call it Mother Russia, and he wants to, gain dominance over not only those former Soviet states, but also he's really, really upset about the United States dismantling this empire that he was overseeing to a certain extent. He's now overseeing Russia and doing a terrible job, from what I can understand. He hasn't diversified their economy and is just depending on oil revenues. Well, at the moment, oil revenues are down, especially because of the pandemic. And so that's causing a lot of trouble in this country. In 1906, Ivan Petrov Pavlov, a Russian neurophysiologist, got the Nobel Prize for working with the neurophysiology of animals, specifically dogs. Most people who recognize the Pavlov name, the first thing they'll say is, oh, salivating. Well, that's true. He conditioned dogs to know exactly when they're going to be fed, and the way he did that was he would measure their saliva. So he would condition them, say, with a metronome. He would do at 400 strokes of the metronome, he would feed them. So at 400, they would start salivating. 390, they wouldn't. 370, they wouldn't. But, so in other words, he won the Nobel Prize for this. Well, he was in Russia after the revolution, and he did his work and then changed from just what you might say is digestive physiology to neurophysiology to see how the brain worked in terms of conditioning. And his work really laid the groundwork for the Russians. Well, let me just read this. Politicians, priests, this is the first paragraph and a half of William Sargent's Battle for the Mind, of his introduction. Politicians, priests, and psychiatrists often face the same problem: how to find the most rapid and permanent means of changing a man's beliefs. When, towards the end of World War II, I first became interested in the similarity of the methods which have, from time to time, been used by the political, religious, and psychiatric disciplines. I failed to foresee, this is William Sargent saying this, I failed to foresee the enormous importance now attached to the problem. Because of an ideological struggle that seems fated to decide the course of civilization for centuries to come. The problem of the doctor and his nervous patient, and that of the religious leader who sets out to gain and hold new converts, has now become the problem of whole groups of nations who wish not only to conform certain political beliefs within their boundaries, but to proselytize the outside world. Great Britain and the USA, therefore, find themselves at last obliged to study seriously those specialized forms of neurophysiological research which have been cultivated with such intensity by the Russians since the revolution, and have helped them to perfect the methods now properly known as brainwashing or thought control. Well, this book was published in 1957, so he wrote that well before that. So 63 years, the Russians, who have specialized then in mind control and brainwashing and mind control, have spent 63 years really perfecting it, and they're really good at it. And Vladimir Putin is like the expert. So we have a situation where they are bombarding our society with these messages on social media, on emails, on advertisements to control the message. So we've got a situation where National Security Advisor Coates said, who was appointed by Trump, said that Vladimir Putin had to have something on Trump. Well, it's really pretty easy to see. The first thing is he interfered in our 2016 election and helped Trump win. So that's sort of a big deal, and it's right out there. He also has had financial dealings, and there's the Steele dossier shows that now allegedly that there's sexual misconduct that is documented. So there's just a few things that he's got a handle on him. And so I want to relate his control of Trump to wanting to bring the United States to its knees so it can elevate Russia. I worked for a university, and what I found is the lifer university employees who settled on mediocrity and settled into their jobs. If there was somebody who came and showed a lot of initiative, they would try to bring them down. I called it one-downsmanship. But this is one-downsmanship on an enormous level. Putin is really bad that we came in and were responsible for decimating and dismantling the Soviet Union so that now he just can deal with Russia, which is a pretty big deal. So I want to bring this over to the COVID situation. So if you look at what Trump does, and I should call him the liar in chief rather than Trump, see what Trump does. He has done everything in his power to downplay the pandemic, to say that it's a hoax, to make it so that people come together without social distancing, without masks, and did not take the plans that were already in place to deal with the pandemic and put them into place, but had Jared Kushner and 4 or 5 of his sort of frat boy buddies who have no public health knowledge at all, to throw out the plans to actually deal with the pandemic on a scientific basis immediately. And one of the reasons it's been reported, whether it's true, it's sort of amazing, that Jared, the little rich boy, he decided that it really didn't make that much difference because it was Democratic states that were having a problem. So mostly Democrats would die. Well, we now know that Trump, all the way back in January, knew about it. So you say, what does this have to do with Putin? Well, what better way to bring America to its knees than to have the President of the United States do everything possible to spread rather than to contain this pandemic. And that's exactly what he's done. So this is to me, criminally negligent homicide. It's treason of the highest order. Our treason, our traitor-in-chief has more than just let us down. He's put us into the dirt. So, without just blaming him, I want to bring into the Republican Party. The Republicans in the House of Representatives and the United States Senate allowed and enabled and abetted this asset of Russia to continue in office when they knew they had impeached him and he was definitely a criminal. There's no doubt, besides the Stormy Daniels individual one, and plus they gave him a free pass to just keep doing criminal activities blatantly out in front of everybody and lying. He is definitely the liar in chief. Imagine anybody who can be documented to have said 20,000 plus lies. So one of the things too is he continues to break the law. It's the Hatch Act with his acceptance of the being asked to be president again. And the Emoluments Clause, they break it all over the place. So anyway, so Putin has got him by the gonads. And through Trump, they're both peeing on the world. It's like, come on, people now, smile on your brother, everybody get together, try to love one another right now.
I can see the soiled sheets, mired in fear's belief. Religion in bed with politics created worlds of war and grief. Now this masquerading of the master has gone on for way too long. So I'm asking you, America, who would Jesus bomb? Wake up, America, love yourself. It's time to see the light come back to the Commonwealth. Wake up, America, while we still have our dream. Let's walk with the Master. Wake up, America, let your heart be seen. I can feel the hollow bellies of children with nothing to eat, while the fat cats on Wall Street find another way to cheat. Now have we become slaves and abandoned our own hearts? Now I'm asking you, America, who would Martin Luther King starve? Wake up, America, free yourself. It's time to live the light, restore the Commonwealth. Wake up, America, while we still have our dream. Let's walk with the masters. Wake up, America, let your love be seen. Now we're calling on the truth, forming higher ideals, reviving integrity, so the earth and her children can heal. I can hear her cry and rave, and the destruction of her lands, in the search for beggar prophets, for a few filthy hands. Now we're suffering here at home from all this corporate greed. Now I'm asking you, America, who would we the people lead? Wake up, America, forgive yourself. It's time to be the light, to rebuild the Commonwealth. Wake up, America, while we still have our dream. Let's walk with the masters. Wake up, America, let your soul be seen. Wake up, America, we still have our dream. Wake up, America, let your heart and your soul be seen. Wake up, America.
Generally, when politicians, and I'm not a politician, I'm not running for anything, close out their speeches, they say, God bless America. Well, what I'd like to say is, God bless the entire earth, no exceptions.